Welcome back to another episode of the Taiwanology podcast. This is your host, Kwangyin from Taiwan's CommonWealth magazine. So with just 1 week left before President-elect Trump's inauguration, we're very excited to welcome Wen Qiyu, a distinguished global affairs advisor and cross-border strategy expert into our studio. Wen Qi's colorful career spans the U.S. Department of State, Goldman Sachs, the U.S. Congress, and several tech companies. Since 2019, she has been a research fellow at Harvard Kennedy School's Ash Center for Democratic Governance and Innovation. And in 2023, she co-founded the Global Women Asia Community to empower women across the region. As President-elect Trump prepares to return to the White House, the stake for U.S.-Taiwan relations have never been higher. Join us today as Wen Qi shares her insight on navigating the complex dynamics between the U.S., Taiwan, and China in these uncertain times. So welcome to the studio, Wen Qi.
Well, thank you for having me, Kwangyin.
Right, so I understand that this is your first time in a studio recording a podcast. How do you feel?
Well, I love the microphone.
It's very high quality. That's the first thing about the studio that I love.
Yeah, you guys are clearly professional.
Yes, as are you. So I understand that you just came back from Hong Kong this morning. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so I was actually in Hong Kong for Milken Institute's roundtable discussions. So Milken Institute, as some people who may know about it, it's technically a think tank, a nonprofit organization, but it is very much focused on global financial institutions. So, it has a global conference that's very well attended every year in Los Angeles. And then also their Asia conference in Singapore. But I think with their, growth, and they're trying to get, obviously, China, which is a very important financial market for them. So they're trying to do more.
Right. What did you talk about in the roundtable?
Yeah, so at the roundtable, it was mostly investors, right? So they actually wanted me to provide a very high-level sort of sharing, from DC perspective, what Trump 2.0 is going to look like.
I see. So it's very similar to what we're going to talk about today. So that's really getting me excited. First of all, Wen Qi, could you tell us a little bit about yourself? We understand that you were born in Taiwan, and then how did your career develop in the States?
Yeah. So actually, I was born in Taiwan. I grew up in Taiwan as well. I didn't move to the U.S. until graduate school. And, because of personal reasons, I chose to stay in the U.S. and actually develop my career there. And I started in the nonprofit sector because I was a younger version of when she was passionate about humanitarian work.
Right.
I used to dream about working for the United Nations. Not anymore, but that was sort of my aspiration. And so that was my first step. And then, as my career developed, I joined the U.S. government. I was very lucky to be pretty much the second, job of my career.
How did it happen? How did you join the U.S. government?
Yeah, I was going to explain that. So I was very lucky because when I moved to Washington, D.C., my first job was with Hillary Clinton's nonprofit, which focused on women's issues. And so, I was very lucky to be part of her world. And so when she was appointed as the Secretary of State, she was able to bring, a group of people into the State Department. So I was very lucky to be one of them.
But then from there, you went on to work for the U.S. Congress and Department of State.
Right. So as I mentioned, when I was with her nonprofit, I was very much focused on women's issues. And I got to work on actually some Chinese women's human rights advocates issues. And so I joined U.S. Congress from there because I wanted to focus more on human rights, democracy, and rule of law issues in China. And then when she became Secretary of State in 2009, I joined her in the State Department.
Right,
yes.
Right. What was it like to work there?
In the State Department?
Yes.
Well, a younger version of me would say, of course, that was, super exciting because read so much about the State Department and you live in Washington, D.C., always there's sort of, the career trajectory is always, nonprofit, congressional, and then, the administration, right? So I was very lucky. But of course, you have to deal with a lot of bureaucratic issues, which, I would say in some way I agree with Trump in terms of his wanting to cut down, the bureaucracy. But one thing, probably something that the U.S., if you understand it, you do know. The U.S. fundamentally, a lot of people want to do good to the world. And so leveraging the power of the U.S. government to do good things in the world, that impact was tremendous. And I do not think you can find any other platform to do that. So again, I was very fortunate to have that opportunity.
Right. It's what they say. The more capable you are, the more responsibility that you bear, right? So I guess working in the U.S. government sometimes could feel like that. And then how did you become a research fellow at Harvard University?
Yeah, so from the U.S. government, because when I was in the government, I did a lot of work with the private sector, many companies, American companies, because part of our job is to help companies advance their international markets and access to markets issues. So, I was very lucky that we worked a lot with Goldman Sachs at that time. They're very interested in, certain emerging markets. And when I was leaving the government because Secretary Clinton left the government, so they approached me about a position in Asia that they would like me to be the head of, which is corporate philanthropy. So I joined Goldman Sachs and I ran their Asia corporate philanthropy for a couple of years. I was based in Beijing and Hong Kong. And I spent 50% of my time in China because that was their most important emerging markets they're trying to figure out. I also spent a lot of time in India. I would say 30% of my time was there. And then the rest is like Japan, Southeast Asia, etc. I got to learn a lot about, finance is obviously very important, but also just sort of in China in particular, the technology sector. I worked with a lot of tech clients. So that was also during the time when China's technology sector was growing so fast.
Wasn't it 2010s?
Yes. So I was there from 14 to 17. So you see just the birth of unicorns and, this crazy competition, fierce competition, and super exciting. I mean, it was so dynamic.
Right.
That's something I think you have to experience to understand.
Lucky of you to have experienced it because I think China now is very different from what you have experienced before. Right. And you went on to be a research fellow at Harvard.
Yes.
And you also sometimes interview very important speakers and thinkers for TVBS, a local TV channel. And that's how we met.
Yes.
And so that's a very great show. I really enjoy watching it.
Thank you.
And so back to why we have you here today is because in a week, President-elect Trump is going to return to the White House. So it's almost like Return of the Jedi, right?
It feels that way.
Right. So coming from DC, what's the mood now? What are people expecting?
I have to say, I mean, for someone who's lived in DC on and off for about 20 years, it's a strange feeling because in Washington, D.C., I would say 90% of the residents there are probably Democrats, right? So the loss of Kamala Harris and the possibility of Trump returning created a lot of anxiety among the people there. But there is also, I would say, excitement about the things that he wanted to accomplish if he could do that.
Such as?
I think government efficiency is something.
Doge.
Yes.
I love that name.
Yes.
Right. Yeah.
It's something everyone agrees, needs to be done, but no one was able to do it. So if he could have that done, obviously with Elon Musk and, Vivek and those people's support, I think that would be very good. But there's also some fear. So it's a mix of feelings.
Fear about something in particular?
I think there's the fear of him not following the rule of law, right?
Right.
Yeah, he's someone who's very unpredictable. What he did during his first term, January 6th, and how far would he go? I guess it's a double-edged sword. You have someone who's so, bold and not willing to follow rules, and that's why he's able to accomplish so much. But in the meantime, what if he used his power in the wrong way?
Right. So I guess we have to believe that the U.S. government, the Constitution, and the apparatus are strong enough to uphold the regulatory environment so that nothing untoward happens, right? But what do people expect the second Trump term to be? How is it going to be different from the first term?
I actually think this is his last 4 years. Well, let's hope that he's not going to want to seek the third term. So he's going to want to rush to get a lot of things done. 4 years is a very short period of time. The first term, to be honest, I think because he's a complete outsider. He didn't know how Washington, D.C. works. And he appointed a lot of people he later regretted because he would say they're establishment, right? So there was a lot of resistance for his first term in terms of helping him to do what he wanted to do. And so this second term, I think he's returning a lot more prepared. He knows how Washington, D.C. works, and he's appointed a lot of outsiders who actually are going to, or vow to change how things are done in Washington, D.C. So I think you're going to see a lot more bold actions coming from this administration. The question is whether, I always question, someone's execution capability. So will he create chaos, or will he be able to disrupt things and put things back together in the right way? I think that is a huge question to me because, given his personality and, he just doesn't seem like a person who wraps up things well and is very organized. He seems very impulsive. And that's my worry.
Let's see if he has evolved, if he could disrupt, but then also build.
Yes.
Right. So, since you're back to Asia, a region that you're most familiar with, I think people are also very eager to know if what would Trump's approach to China be this time? Would he be more aggressive? After all, he started the U.S. China trade war that is still kind of lingering now. And what do you expect his approach would be this time?
Again, I think he actually has a better idea of what he wanted to accomplish this time. And so it will be less confusing. I think he will be very much focused on leveraging U.S. economic power to achieve his objectives. And so tariffs, he already said,
right,
is a most beautiful word in his mind.
Yeah.
And he just announced, right, 25% of tariffs in addition to existing tariffs on all imports from China on day one. And but he also pledged to impose 60% of tariffs on campaign trail. So, I'm wondering if he's really going to go up to 60 or he's going to, we know that he likes to use those threats as a way to get people to the negotiation table, but whether he's really going to stick to that particular number, percentage or not.
It's hard to say.
Yeah, it's really hard to say. So that's number one. And then what is more interesting to me is how he is going to treat democracy and human rights issues, which has always been a very important pillar of U.S. diplomacy towards China. So there are different levers that the U.S. can use. And it's not something I think Trump likes to really prioritize those values.
He didn't bring that up the first term. I don't remember that.
Yeah, I think he's a cold-blooded, calculation-based person, right? He's very business-oriented. So those value-based democracy, human rights, and all
He's woke.
I don't think he doesn't care. It's just he's not going to prioritize those values.
But human rights and those values they are in the toolbox that he can use.
Exactly. So I think he will use them to his interests, right? So if that helps his negotiation with China, he will use it. Same with Taiwan.
Right.
Right? Taiwan is in his toolbox. So how can he leverage these different tools to achieve his ultimate goal? So then you ask, what is his ultimate goal?
Yeah. What is that?
I do think it's America first.
Okay.
Right? He wants to make America sort of be viewed as the world leader again, which means it's not getting involved in all regional wars and conflicts and all that. It's really about sheer power, right? Military might, economic power. So he will be very focused on strengthening this, I would call, hard power of America.
Right. So I agree with you. And you used a word that I think is the key point, viewed as. So the perception here is what matters. So I think as long as Trump can emerge looking like the winner and looking like she has kowtowed to him and has compromised, then this is something that he could already parade in front of his voters, saying that, yes, I have achieved something that Biden couldn't have achieved or Democrats couldn't have achieved in 100 years. So looking like the winner, I think, is very important for him. But then, so from another perspective, what would China expect from Trump 2.0?
Well, I think they already expected the raised tariffs. It's interesting because Trump just did an interview over the weekend and he revealed that he had communication with Xi Jinping after the election. And then you see Beijing, making the move to loosen its monetary policies, which in my interpretation is that in their conversation, they confirmed that Trump was going to raise tariffs.
Right.
Now, China, unlike the first term, I think, Trump's policies or actions a lot of times came as a surprise. But I think China this time is a lot more prepared. And so I think China has been building up its own resilience. And also it's going to be a lot less dependent on the U.S. economy. So the harm wouldn't be as severe, I think, or as a shock to its economy. I think that's one thing. Now, what can they expect other than that? What does Trump need China for? I can see that a lot of other regional issues, North Korea, we know that's another priority of Trump's. I don't know why he's so obsessed.
North Korea. Okay, why?
Yeah, about, striking a peace deal with North Korea. That seems to be something he's very obsessed with.
Okay.
And so you'll definitely need China to get North Korea to the table as well.
I see. So I think this time around, China is more familiar with Trump's pattern or lack thereof, and probably more prepared to talk and to make deals, right? Great. So my next question would be Taiwan, but we're going to take a brief break and we'll come back to the show. Welcome back to the Taiwanology podcast. This is your host, Liu Kwangyin from CommonWealth magazine. Today we have in our studio Wenqi Yu. She is a distinguished global affairs advisor who is based in DC. And earlier in the show, we just talked about how Trump's second term would look similar to or different from his first term, and then we commented on his China policy. But the next question would be something that's on a lot of our listeners' mind, since this show is about Taiwan, is how do you see Taiwan's role evolving? And also in Trump's second term, would there be any difference?
Yeah, I think Taiwan has also learned from Trump's first administration, but Taiwan also is probably, I hope, is aware that the second term is not going to be exactly the same as the first term. The people he's has appointed and the people he used to use may not return to the government, for example. And also Taiwan's role in recent years, it's sort of become this island of semiconductors. It's known for that. Of course, it's much more than that. Is also something that Taiwan needs to know how to leverage for its international participation as well as projecting its power.
Right. How can Taiwan take advantage of that? I remember last time when we had lunch, you are very much, that's pretty much in your heart. You really want to do something like that. But how can Taiwan really leverage its power?
Yeah, I think first recognizing how important semiconductors are today's modern world. In all my conversations, it's very interesting. If I was talking to Taiwanese people, of course, they're very proud of, TSMC, semiconductors, etc. But I don't think they fully realize how important it is to the world and to the advancement of modern technologies like AI, right? Today, we have this AI boom because, semiconductors are the driving sort of the fuel.
Right.
And so that linkage, I feel that Taiwan needs to fully understand. And then second, it cannot just stop there, right? It's not just about semiconductors. You don't want to be this one industry, country and island. And so what are the other things? You got to think ahead. So what are the other industries that Taiwan is very good at? And I think it's in Taiwan's advantage to think about other emerging tech, right? So biotech, I actually find Taiwan is, has its own advantage. So what are the other industries that Taiwan can get ahead of others? So, it's like semiconductors, right? Taiwan was ahead of others 30 years ago, had the foresight to create this industry. And so I think Taiwan needs to do that for other industries now.
Then what's next? Find the next thing.
Right.
Right. So I think when we're talking about semiconductors, how Taiwan is having so much advantage in that, I do think there exists a kind of debate. So it's about the silicon shield, right? So some people in Taiwan like to talk about the silicon shield, saying that, because we manufacture so much of these advanced chips, it's a protection. But then at the same time, we also see that TSMC is expanding overseas because it's very relevant for a lot of countries' economic security. So TSMC setting up shop in Arizona, in Germany, in Japan. And some people are worried that, could this dilute Taiwan's importance? And even though Taiwan right now still dominates, when this concern of geopolitical risks rise even more, could Taiwan lose the protection of the silicon shield?
Yeah, I think TSMC has grown so much that it also needs some transition. And so perhaps this geopolitical change provides the right opportunity. So just global expansion itself is not a bad thing. It actually could be to its advantage, right? So you get talent, you get, a different system, different newer ways of doing things that could be beneficial to your existing system. But of course, it's also, potential disruption. And of course, there's a lot of, I would say, complaint that how Taiwan has this unique ecosystem. That's why TSMC has been so successful and that cannot be replicated elsewhere. I believe there's some truth to that, but I also believe that TSMC will find its new way to do business. And it may not be exactly the same, but smart business, organizations know how to survive, how to adapt. So that is, my hope.
Yeah, I think you raised an excellent point because I remember having some conversation with a business leader a few weeks ago, and she said that if you look at the 10 most successful Taiwanese companies, TSMC was the least international of them all because it never needed to do any global branding, expansion, marketing, didn't even have a brand ambassador or brand marketing.
No, they didn't do any of that.
They didn't need to do, they didn't feel that had to do any of that. So they are actually just starting in this trajectory to becoming a truly global company. So,
and I want to point that out because I'm actually quite close to TSMC's one of the top leaders in the U.S. So we talk about this all the time, right? So he's not Taiwanese, and so it's also taken him some time to adjust to how TSMC headquarters works.
I feel sorry for him.
But exactly what you were saying. Yeah. So TSMC is so good at doing what it's doing, which is manufacturing. It doesn't really know how to behave outside of that.
Didn't need to do anything else.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, we say like, even in Arizona, how to build community relationship, how to do...
None of that.
No, none of that PR or anything of that. They just don't know.
Right. So it's almost like a coming of age of a schoolboy who is so good at studying, and the mother always told him, all you need to do is study. You don't need to worry about anything else.
Very Taiwanese too.
Very Taiwanese. And when this boy grows up and becomes an adult in this world, and he really needs to learn people skills,
yes,
and how to talk
social.
to girls, how to be a normal person, how to care about what other people care about. Right. I think this is really coming of age of TSMC. I think there's a book.
I think it's good for TSMC.
Yes, right. So very, very fascinating. Yeah. And then we come to Taiwan's challenges. You just talked about the opportunities for Taiwan. What would be the challenges for Taiwan if we want to expand our international relationships?
I think the next few years, in my view, is going to be an era of the law of the jungle. And so every country is going to look after its own national interests, hardcore interests. And so Taiwan really needs to focus on strengthening its, again, hard power. I think Taiwan has both advantages, both the softer side. I don't want to say the softer side, but the value side, right? Mm-hmm. Democracy, human rights, and all that. But these days, to demonstrate your value, especially to someone like Trump, all he cares about is like, what value do you bring to me? And so it's a great opportunity because of Taiwan's technology advancement. So really think bigger than that, right? We're going to see a lot more investment in the whole world in military and hard technology investment. And so the trickle-down effect is AI, semiconductors, sonar, robotics, biotech, and all these things, right? The fundamental industries. So how can Taiwan also be part of that and develop its own power? So there's a lot of like drones, for example, being developed here. Find its own advantage, demonstrate its value to the world, I think is the transition that Taiwan really needs to latch onto.
Right. So I think in Biden administration, I think there was a lot of talk about alliance of democracies. And I think when Trump comes back, that wouldn't be the priority. It'll be an alliance of interests. So Taiwan needs to demonstrate that it has something concrete to offer. Sometimes Trump talked about protection fees, but I think it's talking about that Taiwan needs to maybe buy more things from the U.S., invest more in the U.S. It's already happening, but that's likely to accelerate, and I think that would be expected.
Right? I totally agree with you. Yes.
Great. So finally, I would like to talk about something lighter. That's a community you started. You co-founded with a few other women.
And men.
In 2023. And men, okay. So you started the Global Women Asia Community. What's that about?
Yeah. It's a nonprofit that, like you said, a group of like-minded people started because we all sort of are global citizens. We consider ourselves, but with, strong connections to Asia. And during the last few years, we feel, of course, the world has changed because of COVID, because of geopolitics. But the most fundamental thing we want to see continuing is the people-to-people connections and also understanding. And so we created this community to connect and, really elevate people like that. And so we have a fellowship program for younger women, who are ambitious and will become future leaders. We also, highlight role models. We also, honor, groundbreakers. And every year we have a different theme. But at the end of the day, it is to create understanding. And the inclusion of different perspectives is what we care about. Asia is so important to today's world. I think from the U.S. in particular, still looks at Asia as some exotic, like a region, right? That's why it's China policy is so...
Okay, but Asia is so diverse.
Yes.
Yeah, it has dozens of countries with different languages and culture.
Exactly. That's why, right? Even within Asia is so diverse. And so we always make sure we include, South Asian, Southeast Asian, East Asian. So again, it's the inclusion of perspectives is what we're really about.
Right. So very happy to see initiatives that highlight the diverse Asian women communities. And I also saw that you support fellows in STEM study.
Yep.
And I think that's something that we need to see more of this day and age.
Absolutely.
Great. So Wenqi, so nice to have you back in Taiwan and great to have you in the studio. I really enjoyed our conversation.
Likewise. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Wenqi. So that wraps up today's episode. If you enjoyed this podcast, please take a moment to leave a review or shoot us an email. To read more in-depth reports on Taiwan's role in this changing economic situation, please visit CommonWealth's English website. Our next episode will be available on January 28th. This show is produced and edited by Yayuan Zhang and Weiru Wang. I'm your host, Liu Guangying. Follow Taiwanology wherever you get your podcasts. Until next time.